Hey, this is Evan, Head of Engineering for RMSTATOR. Today we're going to be showing you how to do a stator and voltage regulator change on a Kawasaki Versys 650. This one's an 08 model, I think. I'm pretty sure the process is the same on pretty much all years of the Versys 650. I'm no expert on these, but I don't think they changed a lot. So this should be pretty close for any of those, but like I said, this is an early one. I think it's an 08. We're going to be installing our stator, and we're going to be installing our MOSFET voltage regulator upgrade. These bikes definitely had charging system problems. They weren't uncommon for stator and regulator failures. So this bike's about to be ridden down to Baja, Mexico from here in Colorado, and we're doing, it already has a little bit of a charging system problem. It's functioning, but the output's really low, and I suspect we're going to find a bad stator when we pull the cover. So we're, to be safe, changing out the system before this bike goes on a really long trip. So you can see we've got a nice clean bike to start with. I think there's 30,000 miles on this or so. This bike did have crash bars on it, which, you know, most don't necessarily have these, so I went ahead and took them off. I'm not going to show that. There's just a couple bolts that remove them. So I removed that from the left side. I have drained the oil since we're going to be pulling the stator cover. We don't want to have to dump a quart of oil out. So I drained the oil, and then I've already loosened, and I'll remove the side covers to get started. So the plastic cover here is a single bolt, 4mm Allen head, so then that just pops right off. Get that out of the way. Then I also removed the lower, I don't know what you'd call it. It's not really a skid plate, but lower plastic protection piece that also mounted with three, I think 5mm Allens here. So I removed all three of those. I can get that out of the way. And now we have good access to what we need to get to. The stator cover is right here. Like most Japanese bikes, it's held on with 8mm bolts all the way around. So my next step will be to loosen those. Before I do that, we'll do a close-up here to show you, but I've unplugged the stator connectors, which are right here. We have our pickup coil and our stator charging output. And the connectors are easy to get to right here in the triangle of the frame. So I've disconnected those, and I have also loosened the battery mounts, which are two regulator mounts, which are two 10mm bolts. And I've already removed those. Again, we'll do close-ups of all these, but just showing you all the prep stuff that I've done on the side of the bike to get ready. So now we'll go ahead and bring you in close, and I think we'll go ahead and get the stator out first, so I'll show you that. Okay, so I went ahead and removed the chain sprocket guard right here, two 8mm bolts, and it just slides right off. And that lets me kind of free up the wires and separate them, because we have a bundle here that goes to your, looks like there's a gear position indicator been added to this, and probably neutral switch wire. So these are all part of the bundle. So anyways, moving that out of the way frees up some more room on the side of the stator cover here. So first we want to unplug the stator, which we can, like I said, trace it right up here. Unplug that from the three wires, and then let me look. I was thinking we would have to unplug this other one I thought was a pickup coil, but no, it looks like that's actually a side stand switch. I was wrong. So we can leave that alone. So it looks like, yeah, so all we need to unplug from this setup is our stator connector right here, three wires. I was thinking the new stator doesn't have a pickup coil. I was assuming there'd be two wires for a pickup coil on this side, but that must be mounted somewhere else on this motor, so no problem. So we've unplugged the stator right here, our 3-pin connector. I've undone all of the 8mm bolts all the way around. I used some cardboard here to make a template, because there are a lot of different lengths of bolts. So I made a template for location. Take out my last one. Okay, so now we're ready to pull the cover off. There's pry points here, here, and here, and all three of those will let you get a pry bar or a screwdriver against them and gently pry off three separate spots of the cover. So doing that, you can get it really nice and loose, and then you should be able to pull it off. This might take me a minute because it's definitely loose but still stuck a little bit. So I'm going to pry a little bit more at the bottom. There we go. And pull it outright. Okay, our intermediate gear for the starter clutch fell down, but that's okay. All right, then I have it out here. we can see our flywheel. You can see one of the intermediate gears, and here's the second one that fell out, so we'll check that, make sure it's all lined up properly when we put it back together. But that is our stator removal for the cover. Now we're going to go ahead and put it on the bench, and we will swap the stator out in the side cover. So let's do that next. Okay, so we have the stator cover on the bench here. These are, I believe, 5mm. Yeah, 5mm Allen head bolts. So I've already loosened them all, but they're all the same. 3 for the stator and 1 that holds the wire bracket down. So I've removed all those. Good, these have Loctite on them, which was great. When you reinstall this, you have to put Loctite on all the mounting bolts. Do not forget that, because they can come loose. Then you can lift the stator up and out. And I can see this stator was still working, but we were getting measurements, so resistance measurements were good, doing a resistance test. However, when the bike was running, we were measuring voltage between the stator wires and ground. And what that was telling me is that there is probably some bad spots in the insulation here that's allowing a leakage or a short to ground in current coming from the stator. So as soon as I lift that up, we can see here, it's not horrible, but if you look close, we've got some dark spots here where oil is burned onto the windings and some inside that pull. Then we flip it over, we can definitely see it more here. Here's a really crusty spot, one there, one there. So all these spots where oil has really caked and burned onto the windings, any one of those could be a short that's developed. So this stator certainly had to be replaced, especially before a trip to Baja with really hot temperatures. So I'm glad we checked it. Okay, I'm gonna just get some of the old thread locker out of there. Okay, then we take our new stator. It's going to drop in place, and we'll get it lined up in a minute. I'm going to move the wires around a little bit. I can see that our grommet will probably need to be shifted, and my hands are too oily, so I'll have to do that in a minute. So I'll shift the grommet a little bit to line up perfectly with the spot here, but I need to clean my hands off. So I'm going to go ahead and mount the stator down. Let's see, let me move it around, find the best spot to line up bolt holes. There we go, just like that. So that puts our wires exiting in the right location, like there, and our bolt holes lined up. So I'm going to wipe these off a little bit. Going to put more thread locker on them. I prefer red. Blue is fine too for this purpose. I would use red if I had it, but I don't have any here right now. And red can be really difficult sometimes to get them back off if you ever have to change this in the future. So depends who you ask. Some people will say red, some people will say blue. I prefer red if I have it, but not a problem to use blue here. And I use a decent amount on the threads. I'm not planning on this stator needing to be changed for quite a while, so make sure it stays well. And I'll go back and tighten these up one last time after I finish. So this will take me a minute. I'm not going to show all this here, but I'm going to slide the grommet back a little bit just to get a nicer position so there's no strain on the wires. Wires are going to go in the pocket here. And I'm going to put in the wire clamp. There's a little kind of dowel pin at the bottom that locates it. And sometimes you just got to move stuff around a little bit until it lines up. Yeah, that's close. Go ahead and put some thread locker on that bolt. And get it started. There we go. Then I'll move this around the last bit to get the wires exactly where I want them. Right there. So I've got the wires captured. I'll show you in a second as soon as I tighten this. So I have the wires captured in the bracket. I have the bracket sitting over the locating pin. That keeps the wires really nicely tucked away from the flywheel, so there's no chance of them rubbing. So the last thing I'll do is reposition the grommet so it fits into place. And then I'm also going to use a new razor blade here, and I'm going to clean and scrape the whole gasket surface of the cover, so it'll make a nice seal with the new gasket. I'll also check the engine side and make sure it's clean, but it looks like most of this came off on this side. So that's it for swapping your stator. We'll get back to the bike next and reinstall this. Okay, so we're back at the bike. We have our side cover of the motor, or the crankcase is cleaned up, and I've cleaned up the stator cover as well. I have the stator installed and Loctited. I have grommet in place. Everything's ready. I have the starter gears back in place as well, so you can see how they're installed. The one larger one with 2 gears meshes here with the starter, and then the smaller teeth mesh with the intermediate gear to the ring gear on the flywheel. So there's really only one way they all fit back together, so don't be worried if they fall out when you pull the cover off. Okay, so unfortunately we're still waiting on a gasket that didn't arrive in time, so we're just going to show how to finish this up. I usually use a thin coating of black RTV silicone on the stator cover gaskets, just really thin smear on both sides here and on the gasket, and that really works well to prevent any leaks. So since I'm going to be replacing this gasket as soon as I have one, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put it in place here to show you. So and the nice thing too is the RTV will hold the gasket in place really well while you line up your cover. For the moment, that's not a problem. Okay, so I have everything ready there. I'm going to take the stator cover and I'm going to try and hold it back a little bit. The flywheel is going to want to pull it on. The magnets on the flywheel will pull pretty strongly. And like I said, if you use RTV, your gasket won't be bouncing around all over the place like mine is. Okay, but there's I forget what you call it, barrel pins on 2 of these bolts, so they help line up the cover. So it's pretty obvious. If you need to tilt it around a little bit, you'll find the spot where the barrels will line up and it will pull right into place. Then usually give it a tap, make sure it seats up here around the starter area, and your gasket should be in place. Okay, and then you'll put your bolts back in and tighten up your stator cover. Again, I'm not going to finish that here because I'm waiting on a gasket, but you put all your bolts in, tighten them up. I don't have the Torx spec in front of me here. I do them by hand because I've done tons of them, but you can look it up. I'm sure it's fairly low value because you're going into an aluminum case. So you'll tighten those up all the way around. That'll evenly pull the cover in. Then you're going to route your stator wiring right back up here, and it plugs in just like the original into the connector up here. Then you're going to want to pull your wires all back together like they were originally. So I'm not going to finish all that here right now, but I'm going to kind of pull them together like that and reinstall your sprocket cover. So take your time doing this. Route all your wires cleanly along the edge here, get your sprocket cover into place. And you know what this does, this is really important because it keeps the wires routed completely clear from the front sprocket. And if you're not careful about how you line these up, you certainly can have wires rubbing on the sprocket. So take your time to route those well. Again, I'm not going to finish that right here because of the gasket issue. And then you'll be reassembling the side pieces just like you took them off. You have a plastic panel here, plastic protector piece down here, crash guards if you have them like this bike did, will all bolt back on. But as far as your connection, your wiring, very simple for the stator. It just routes right up here, plugs right back in. Not a lot to do, very simple swap. So that's our stator install. We're going to go over to look at the regulator now. So let us get it set up for that and we'll show you. Okay, so the voltage regulator is mounted to a little mounting bracket plate right here underneath the air box and behind the frame. So it's a little bit of a tight fit, but you can certainly get to it pretty easily. I used a small ratchet and 10mm socket, and I was able to get down to both bolts and loosen them right through here. So I've already loosened them. I'm going to block the whole screen trying to show you doing it, but there's 2 10mm bolts, one on each side. I've already loosened them, removed both. So now your regulator will be loose on the plate, and I have already unplugged it because I wouldn't be able to actually show you the plug if it was in the way. So here is the connector for the voltage regulator. Now it has a locking tab right here at the top, And it's just kind of a tight fit because you'll have the regulator wedged in there still and it'll still be plugged in. So what I did was kind of gently pulled the regulator back a little bit so I could see the locking tab. And then I was able to push it down using a screwdriver right here at the back of the tab. And you have to push it down pretty good. And it'll release while you pull back gently on the regulator. So it's not super hard, but you got to kind of get the right angle and get on the tab back there to release it. Okay. So with that out of the way, you can see the mounting bracket inside there and our new voltage regulator. Now, we make an OEM style just like this. Same built-in plug, same size. We have this available. In this bike, we're putting in our MOSFET version, which is a larger housing and it's a better regulation circuit. And it's a nice upgrade on these. It does fit, it's just a tighter fit. So you've got to really kind of wiggle stuff around here. It has the same connector on it, but we have it on a pigtail with kind of a connector box. So what I do is go ahead and feed the connector through, the wiring through, and you'll see that the regulator will fit. And I've already test fit it and lined it up, and it certainly does fit, but it's tight to get the bolt in place. So here's what I did. Go ahead and move this out of the way a little bit. Now, if you're installing the OEM style smaller one, I don't think it's a problem. Just set it in place and get the bolts in place. With this style, the outside of the regulator is slotted and the mounting hole slotted, and it's a tighter fit. So I installed the back bolt, then go ahead and get the regulator in place and slid underneath the bolt to capture one side. Then I took the next bolt, and I probably won't be able to do this on camera well and show you, but by moving it around a bit, you'll find the right spot where the bolt will drop in to the bolt hole, and then you'll be able to tighten them both up with your socket again. So like I said, tight fit, but does fit and works just fine. Then, like I showed you, we have a wiring pigtail because this version of our regulator is used on, trying not to drop a bolt here, there we go, is used on many bikes that use that connector style, so we make this kind of universal for lots of fitments. And because of that, you have your wire pigtail. So you could do it either way. You could plug it in first, just like this, and it's just a plug in, it'll click when it's connected. And then you could pull the wires through to the other side while you get this mounted, or you can mount it first, fish the wires through, connect it on the other side of the bike, and then you will need to route this nicely and tie it up. So the wire's out of the way. The nice thing is there is part of the frame right here. There's a down tube for the frame right in the middle, and that's a great spot to tie the wiring to. Keeps it out of the way of the shock and the swing arm and everything. And there's no exhaust pipe near it or anything. So that's a great spot to do it. So that's what I'm going to show you there. I'm not going to finish the install here because I can't cleanly show you how to do it, but that should explain how to install that. So I hope that helps. The last step that we always do is check the battery and test our charging system to make sure the new parts are working, and we will show you that as soon as I button everything up. Okay, so anytime you're doing any work on the charging system, you want to check it out when you're done. So I have my voltmeter connected to the battery here, and we're just going to go ahead and fire the bike up and make sure that we've got good charging voltage, which should be 14 or so. This has a new battery in it, so it's going to charge fairly high. So, perfect. So right there we see 14.6 at idle, so we're getting full output. Everything's charging well. And so that's it. That's how you do a charging system on a Versys. Check out rmstator.com. Thanks.